For more on the EU elections, I'm now joined by Aurel Braun from Toronto. Aurel is a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto. Aurel, thanks very much for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. If I could say, perhaps one of the takeaways is surprise. Surprise at the traditionalists, the Central Coalition, losing the majority. Should people have seen that coming?
There were signs, there were disturbing indications. This was an important election, both symbolically and substantively. It is also a very complicated result that needs to be carefully deconstructed because various parties are going to try to both shade and sometimes perhaps even gaslight the results. So we need to look at the overall picture and then begin to dissect it, because I think overall this is definitely not good news for the European project.
Interesting. Tell me, let's pick up on that, because you talked about shade, gaslighting, spin. That is a time-honored tradition in going to the polls. But what are your concerns moving forward?
When we look at this election, what is striking to me is that the four big powers in the EU, that is Germany, Italy, France, and Britain, produce results that challenge the notion that the European integration was linear, that it is irreversible. In 3 out of 4 cases, that is Italy, France, Britain, the largest parties that emerged are parties that are basically anti-EU. The Brexit Party in Britain won far more than any other party that ran for the European election. In the case of Italy, Matteo Salvini ran on an anti-EU platform. In the case of France, the Rally National also beat out Macron's party. It was only in Germany that Merkel's party emerged victorious, and that's 1 out of 4. And then we can also see what happened in Poland, where the anti-EU parties did extremely well, and in Hungary, where they also won overwhelmingly. This does not bode well for the idea that integration, institutional building is entirely successful. Yes, the European Union has produced some impressive results.
Right.
Unquestionably, there have been successes. But at the same time, integration is run up against the issue of sovereignty and of national identity.
I want to pick up on that because the nationalists did gain ground. How is that going to be looked at today, and what is it going to mean for immigration, a hot-button issue?
Well, let's start with the first part, what it means for the EU. And if you look at Nigel Farage, what he's saying is that he wants to challenge, perhaps even destroy the EU from within. And so a lot of these parties are going to make the institutional processes far more difficult. And European institutions have distanced themselves from the population. They become overly bureaucratized. They have become largely inefficient in many, many respects. And those failings have not been addressed. There is also the issue of immigration. And when we are looking at national identity, this was one of the factors in the case of Britain. And it is certainly one in Italy. And it is an important element in France as well. So immigration, which was pushed by Angela Merkel in Germany, has had a very deleterious effect on preserving the unity of the European Union. It is not the single issue, but it was a major issue. And the elites in Strasbourg and in Brussels did not pay enough heed to the concerns that local people had, that they were not necessarily anti-immigrant, they were not necessarily racist, but they did have a legitimate concern about their jobs, about their national identity.
Aurel, I want to pick up and talk about green parties as well, because we're looking at polarization. If you look at the way this played out, clearly people do want environmental controls. It's in sharp contrast to what we have seen in other non-European nations.
They do. Europe is a very heavily populated, small continent with large concentrations of populations, especially in industrial areas. Pollution is an everyday concern. So it is not surprising that the Green parties have done well. But I think those who believe that the Green parties will necessarily support the European project that they are entirely pro-integration may be in for some nasty surprises, because the Green parties are largely about the environment. They are not necessarily so heavily committed to European integration as, let's say, Mr. Macron is, or Mr. Macron would like them to be. And so if they are part of our coalition, it may prove to be a rather fragile coalition.
Aurel Braun, thank you very much. Big turnout, some big surprises, and I'm sure we will come back to you again very soon to talk about how this is playing out. Thank you.